So we're back with lesson 12, part 2. We've implemented our ability to select and delete an artist, as well as a clear button on our form. So now we want to be able to edit an artist name. So again, we're going to need that kind of cascade of update method. So we'll start in our Express controller. And we're going to write one more method here, and we're going to use the put method in our artist controller. So we've got get for reading data, post for creating data, delete, self-explanatory, and the most common method for performing updates in a REST API is put. So our URL again is going to be API/artists/ABC123. So we'll say update returns 400 bad request, or 202. Actually, I think 202, I'll have to check out. I know I said 204 is resource modified. I don't think that's the case. Let me just check my HTTP status codes. Okay, so 400. Sorry, I want 200. No content, sorry. So delete was no content. 202 is resource accepted. Maybe change that. So this would be just accepted. So again, our path is the same for put as it is for delete, :_ID, request response. So we're going to call artist.findById and update. So our ID is request.params._ID. Our second method is the request body. So request.body. And then our callback. So we'll do our error handling. Send back the error as a JSON object. Otherwise, we'll send back the new artist, the status of 202. Okay, I may need this. Bear with me. Okay, yes, sorry. We're going to set it as a JSON object. I need a key. So I forgot my ID key. So there's our update method in the back end. We'll now need an update artist method in our Angular service, as well as in our Angular component. And then we'll need an event handler on our update button that will call our component update method. So we can go check out our service Go back to our client and our service. And now we can set up our update method. So it takes an artist object, which we'll just define as any. So now we're going to call put. So we're going to append on the artist ID to the end of the URL. We pass in the artist as our object we're going to modify, and then our HTTP headers, as we did with both post and delete. What's it telling me here? Whoops. So we're taking in an artist object as a JSON object. We're going to grab the ID and append it on to the end of the URL. So notice the syntax here is different. In delete, we're actually explicitly just getting ID as a string. In this case, our incoming parameter is an entire object. So we need to parse the ID out of that object, then pass our artist as a JSON object along with our headers. So there's our service method. There's our second of three. And now we can go to the artist component and write the method that actually gets invoked from our button click, and it will pass the artist ID to update artist, which will then send it along to our server API. So we'll go to the component. This will be the longest, kind of similar to our add artist. We're going to create an artist object, pass it to the service, and then call get and clear. So we'll have two parameters, the ID and the name. Sorry, we'll say this dot. Just thinking, do we even need, you know what, we don't actually need the parameters. I'm sorry. We can just take them from using this, because they're already filled from our two-way data binding. So we can just fill the name and ID. So we will create new object populated from foreign values. Then we can call the service and we can subscribe. We'll get a response. And then we'll call get and clear. So populate a new object from our form values, call update, passing in that artist to the service. The service then sends it as a put request to our API, which calls find by ID and update. It's grayed out in my editor because this method is never used. So our final step should be to wire up an event handler so that our update button will actually invoke it. So we'll go back to our HTML. We can add a click handler here. So we've got to pass in, actually, I don't think we have to pass in anything, do we? Let's see the way we wrote it. No, because it just reads these values from the current ID and name properties. So we don't need any parameters here. So now let's try this out. I'll add an artist. And now I'll try to update it. So now my artist name changes. My form clears. And if I want to delete, we can delete. So that didn't take us too long, right? 3 methods again. I know I'm being repetitive, that's the idea. So 1 method in our API using put, our Angular service that calls that. So here's our put method in our Express controller. The update method in our Angular service that makes a HTTP call. And then our component that handles the button click, interacts with the front end, and then invokes our service, which talks to our server backend. Any questions at all about any of these methods? There are a few different ways we could structure them, so this is not absolutely the only way to do this. I'm going to throw out a choice. I will be honest, this actually went quite a bit faster than I imagined it was going to go today. So it's 12:15, we've got a couple choices. I know everybody's probably spent a lot of time on assignment 3. I'm not sure if you have a lot of other stuff due right now. If you would like, we can wrap up early for today. If you need time to go work on some other stuff, that's totally fine. We've got our full CRUD single page application working, which is great. The other thing we could do is we could add a little more functionality. Coming back to Adam's point earlier is one piece of functionality that we've removed from this is we don't have the ability to add albums anymore. So our other thing we could do is when we select an artist, we could add a secondary little form down here, and we could try to write the code to add an album that would then refresh our list of albums automatically. So what would you like to do? Do you have other work you need to move on to, or did you want to implement a add album functionality? Okay, Jason's easy going. Chris is easy going. Anybody else? Like to hear from you. Okay, that's a vote for the albums. Okay, 2 votes for let's do the albums. Okay, so let's see if we can do it. We still should be able to wrap up in reasonable time. Okay, all right, so that's 3. No one has said I want to get out of here. So it's a bunch of I'm good either way, and 3 votes for let's do it. Okay, so I will warn you, I did not prep this, but we'll just do the best we can with it. So underneath our form, we've got our details. So maybe here, we will add what do we want to do here? Let's add a div underneath. And again, we'll say star ng if so this section is only going to be visible when we've got an artist selected. Right? So when we're adding a new artist, the albums aren't here. You've got to add the artist first, and then you can go and add albums. So we'll put on an H3 and say, add an album. And we'll put on a separate form. Now, I think for our albums, I think we had, better go back and look at our server model. So we've got title, year, and rating. Okay, so we'll have 3 inputs here. So I'm maybe just going to copy this field set tag from above. We'll paste it in 3 times. So this will be title. Our name and ID will be title. I'm going to take out the NG model just for now. Year. And our second input, the name and ID will be year. We'll also say type equals number. And for our third one, our name and ID will also be rating. So type equals number, min equals 1, and max equals 5. And then down at the bottom, we also need a button that will just say save. So when there's no artist selected, we won't see this. This entire section will be hidden. Okay, we're only going to see this section when we have clicked on an artist and that artist name is showing up in our form with our update and delete buttons. Okay, I'm just going to go check this in the browser. We may need to adjust it a bit, and we'll have to come back. We may wind up needing these ng model directives. Okay, that's useful. So now when we clear, right, it wipes out the ID and our ng if logic here, that then hides our little album form, okay? So now I think we need to work through the same kind of pattern we did with our delete and update. We're going to need an add album method in all 3 layers. So we'll start in our server API. Then we'll have an add album method in the service. and an add album method in the component that is invoked from our button click. Okay. So I'm going to go back to my server, and we'll need a post here. So this will be API/artists/add album, and we're going to need the artist ID. Now, I'm just going to open up. Here, well, I guess I can get it here. I want to reference, we may need to reference the method that we used previously in our original Node tunes. So I'm just going to open up the controller here. I want to have a quick look at our right. So we had add album where we took an ID. So we're going to use basically that same URL. So we're finding the artist by the ID, and then we are pushing our request. So I'm going to use this as a bit of a reference. So when we get a post request, an add album with an ID, we're going to get the selected artist. So we'll call find by ID. So we will either get back an error or an artist. So if we can't find that artist, we'll send back an error. Otherwise, we're going to call artist.albums.push. So we're going to push, and then we're going to have another callback. Sorry, we just call artist.save. And when we're doing a post, I think we send a 201, which is a resource, new resources created. So we're going to find the artist with the ID. We're going to add to the albums array with push. And then we're going to try to commit that new nested document to MongoDB. So our next step is going to be the method in the add album method in the Angular service. And then our third method, our third version, is going to go in the component. So I'll leave this up for a minute. So it's pretty similar to what we did in our original NodeTunes application. Grab the artist, add the new element to the albums array, save to the database. But again, all our responses, we're just sending JSON responses. I didn't bother with console log in this case. So now we can jump back to our Angular application and we can write the method in the service that will call our put method in the API. Go back to my Angular, my artist service. Okay, so in this case, we'll have two parameters. The first one is the artist ID, which will be a string. And then we'll have an album, which we'll just define as any. Okay, we don't have an album class, so this is just a generic object. So we're going to call post. We're creating a new resource. We call add album. And again, we'll need to append on the artist ID so we know which artist document are we referencing. We'll pass in the album and our HTTP headers. So we need the artist ID and then the album document. So this is our second post method, but notice it's a different endpoint. Previously, post just went to the root URL. This time it's going to be here. So there's our second add album method. And now we need to write the third one that will go in our artist component and then get invoked from our form. Now, when we're creating the new document, I'm just thinking about this. We could define the album up here with our album property. I'm not sure if that'll cause an issue, though. With our NG model. I think for simplicity, just thinking out loud, we'll maybe do it this way. So we'll say add album. So we don't have properties for those. We'll just add them directly, maybe as parameters to the method here. So we'll have title as a string, year as a number, and rating as a number. So that album equals we'll then create a new album object and we'll fill we can try our service. We may have to make a few adjustments to how we're structuring this. I'm going to call add album. Again, we'll subscribe. Okay, we can't read this dot in here, so we do need a parameter. Oh, would just be this. That's interesting. We could pass them here. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, we'll try it like this. So it's going to cast that to a string. We may need to declare the album properties. I'm not sure we can access them in our form. We'll try. I don't think it will work. So on click, we're going to call add album. So we've got ID. Okay, so we need to pass these inputs. I was trying to do this without using ng model. So try this. This may not be the best way of doing it, so bear with me for a moment. Just going to see if this actually works. I don't think it will. So we're passing these 4 values in, but it doesn't seem to like it very much. Let's see. Oh, I'm silly. We don't need to pass the ID into the method because it's already there. Sorry. Okay. I don't think this will work. Yeah, okay. No, it doesn't like that. Okay, so we may need to use our NG model. Let's see. What if we initialize that to an empty string? Okay, maybe we can take out our parameters here and use NG model. I'm flying by the seat of my pants a little bit here. We'll try NG model. I know maybe I'll change our method signature now. Instead of these being parameters, we could probably remove them. So we can just say this. My concern, though, is that the form is going to crash when it first loads because those values are undefined. I'll maybe suppress with a TypeScript ignore for now. See if my app even compiles. Probably not. Okay, it says it does. Okay. All right, I'll try and add an album. Oh. Okay. Well, it mostly worked. We need to obviously change it. Didn't give me the year. So it did save my album, but not the year. So let's figure out why. And then our clear form will also need to wipe out those values. NG model is year and rating. I think I can initialize these to 0. I think if I make it undefined, I think that's going to break my form. Okay, maybe not. All right, so let me go back. So I will define both rating and year as either a number or undefined. Go and find another year. What year is this from? $1965. Okay, we'll try it again. Okay, we're not quite there. We're almost there. But let's see what's missing. Code looks okay here. We've got the title. Okay, well, we could log out to the console here. Let's log out our album object. For debugging purposes, okay. I thought we added the NG model. We added the NG model here. Okay. Adam, the problem is my syntax, or you mean you got it working with bad syntax? Ah, of course. Thank you. I missed. Thank you, Jason and Adam. Yes, the NG model doesn't work. So it was binding the title, but I was missing the round brackets. Thank you. I also should change the clear form to also wipe out right? So clear form. Oh, I'll just set it back equal to. Because I don't allow it to be null. I probably could set it to undefined, actually. I think that would work fine. Same in my declaration. Just make it like the others. Doesn't need to be different. Okay. I think this should work now. I've changed title so it's string or undefined, and now we're clearing all these out. Now I should be able to go, I'm going to go into my database for a minute. I'll just delete those albums and try to recreate them. So I will sign in, and then I think we're good. So I'll browse my collections, my artists. Well, maybe I'll just delete actually the whole document. So Bob Dylan's gone. I can add him back. And now I can try again to add an album. There we go. Add another album. Okay, so there we go. So now we can add, edit, delete, and we can also add new albums as our sub-documents. Thank you for your debugging skills. Excellent work, Jason and Adam. Thank you. All right, so I think that brings us to the end for today for this application. So what we're going to do, I'm just going to push it up to GitHub, to the two repositories. They're separate. I've got both my server and client applications. Right, so here's our Angular client. Here's our backend. So what we're going to do, the main functionality of this stuff is finished for our app. What we will do next week is we want to look at, first of all, securing our backend API. Right now, there's no security at all. Anybody can select data, create, update, delete. So we want to create an access token so that our web application can get in. It's got permission. And then we want to look at how do we deploy this. So this involves a few things. We're going to look at in Angular. We've got this environment here where we've got both a production environment as well as a development environment. So we want to look at when we deploy, how do we use the production environment? We also have a way right now when we're running our app locally, we're using ng-serve. It compiles, but our code is not compressed or minified. And there's a whole lot of unused files that are part of our Angular bundle. We do have a way to build for production that's going to be minified, much more high performance. So we're going to look at building for production, and then how do we deploy this when we've got sort of an app within an app, right? They're two separate applications, but they sort of function as one to the end user, right? Our end user never actually is going to see the API. They only see the client app. So we'll look at the authentication, the bundling, the minification, and the deployment of this next week. We will also talk about the final exam coming up in 2 weeks. I'd hope to have everyone's assignment 3 marked before next week's class as well. So no homework or anything for this week. Any questions before we go?